Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of By Side 3. We're going to expand on what we started on Monday because this is a big conversation. The idea that we need to dive in to figure out what is happening, why it's happening, what are the root causes of what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, what our planet is experiencing. And so let's start just by breathing. We need to breathe this stuff through. So make sure your feet are flat on the floor and you're feeling grounded, and then doing whatever stretching you need to do to feel comfortable, closing your eyes if that helps you to focus. And really taking some deep breaths that go all the way down to your root, all the way down to your essence. Because this is hard, and the breathing helps for us to really be present with this material, with ourselves. It's hard. I know that a lot of you, many of you are struggling right now with the material that we are in this part 2 of the course. And that's because it is hard. It is very hard to think about the greed and the addiction and the ignorance and the uncontrolled growth, that it's natural to go to a place of numbness or disconnect, where we can ignore what's going on potentially, or not think about it enough. And so today we're going to talk about the idea that these wounds are a reflection, the wounds out there are a reflection of inner wounds. So I know that if I'm sad or angry, then those emotions ripple out of me. I know that it changes the tone of my household. If I am feeling something heavy or hard, I know that it affects my kids, and I know that it affects my family, even my pets. They go running from the room. And so these negative things can ripple out of us. And yet I also know that if my heart is open, I generate love and acceptance and appreciation, and that spreads too. I can feel how much more generative, how much more loving my kids are when I am having an open heart, even if it's having an open heart about what's hard. So if I'm angry or upset and I share with them what's going on by being open and loving and sharing with them, it automatically creates connection. So my question today, what we're going to dive into, is how is it then that the separation from ourselves spreads out to the world around us? So where we are right now, the idea that we're experiencing these symptoms, that the oceans are sickening, the climate change, the chemical contamination, habitat destruction, and pandemics, are all symptoms of what's happening at the root cause. So I'd like to address this at this point, the idea that this pandemic is one of those symptoms. Of course, we think of this virus as an enemy that must be stopped. But from a scientific standpoint, this virus is another form of life seeking its own survival. Because humans have encroached upon its natural habitat, it's been forced to take up residence in a species that hasn't co-evolved with it. So this disease, COVID-19, came out of nature. it co-evolved with other species. And so it doesn't really work to have these sort of this invasion of those species space. I understand that a bunch of the TAs are having trouble logging into Zoom. If that's true for your TA, you can go to the BiSci 3 YouTube channel and find the link to today's class there. So you can connect to this streaming if you have friends who are having trouble. If you're in and somebody else is not, please help them by letting them know that they can connect via the YouTube stream. And so I'm going to continue until I know that I shouldn't anymore. So the idea that if we fail to care for nature, it can rear up in devastating and unpredictable ways. So most epidemics, including COVID-19, are the direct result of humans disrupting other ecosystems. 60% of emerging infectious diseases that affect humans are zoonotic, which means that they originate in wildlife. And so how does that happen that then it jumps from other wildlife to us? And that's because we're invading their spaces. Any emerging disease in the last 30 or 40 years has come about as a result of encroachment into wildlands. And then on top of that, the cocktail of air travel, deforestation, wildlife tracking has quadrupled infectious diseases over the last 50 years. So to give an example of how this works, there was a 4% deforestation in the Amazon, which increased the incidence of malaria by 50% or more. So when there's small scale clearing for settlements, it creates more of the forest edge habitat, just like we talked about when we were talking about with Doug and the birds. That habitat, those edges, are where the mosquitoes are breeding. So if we create more edge habitat, then there are more humans being exposed and there are more mosquitoes being bred. And so it increases the rate of malaria in this case. So that's true of other ways that we are invading wildlands, and COVID-19 is a direct response to that. I've linked a number of articles in the module 10, week 10 module that I'd like to direct your attention to related to the coronavirus, and that this is another experience of symptom of the breakdown that we're experiencing. So there are a lot of these symptoms. E.E. Cummings says, I'd like you to write this down. Whenever you think or you believe or you know, you're a lot of other people. But the moment that you feel, you're nobody but yourself. People can be taught what to think or how to think. They can be taught what to believe, can be taught what to know, but feeling can't be taught. It's something that we each have as unique. So I'd like you to think about that, feel into that as we go through this class. So could it be that there is this world of wounds that is separating us in this way? Could it be that this world of wounds is a reflection of our own inner world? You might want to write that down too for later contemplation. So what I'm getting at now is that this is my hypothesis. This is what I've been pondering And I'd like to share my pondering with you. Can you imagine a world with no separation, where there's no shooting, no greed, no racism, no sexism, no speciesism, no separation? So my hypothesis is that we are separate. We are feeling separate from ourselves. We are feeling separate from each other, and we are feeling separate from Earth. And it does stem from this idea that we are feeling separate from ourselves. It's hard to exactly I'm sorry, just a second. Okay. So there is this idea of what does it mean to be separate from ourselves? Do you love yourself as a best friend? Do you smile when you see yourself in the mirror? Do you love? Is your heart open to everyone in this room? Everyone? Absolutely everyone you walk by on campus? Do you love Mother Earth? Did you greet the sun this morning and express your gratitude? So I'd like you to talk about this in your group me, in your Zoom right now, and see what you think about this hypothesis. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. It's my theory. I want you to talk about it. So what do I mean separate from ourselves? What do I mean by this? What I mean is that it shows up like this, that we are labeling ourselves in some way, not smart enough, not good enough, not interesting enough, not attractive enough, not strong enough. It's really this. John Wellwood said, a deep seated suspicion most of us harbor that we cannot be loved or that we are not truly lovable for who we are. And what does that look like? I imagine that all of you know what this looks like, what this feels like. This idea of looking in the mirror and you smile, even on a bad hair day, you can look in the mirror and be like, oh my gosh, there I am. Hey, good morning. Hey, that's me. Greeting yourself with kindness, with appreciation, with compassion. Greeting yourself with, you are enough. I am enough. And so there are ways of expanding this idea of self-compassion, but we need to dive into it in the way this separation from ourselves, the way it shows up is tuning into your self-talk is really helpful. If you just are having time by yourself, are you enjoying the time by yourself? Say it's Saturday morning and I've scheduled a date with myself. I can have my coffee. I can do some art. Are you your own best friend? The separation from ourselves, our self-talk shows up often 50 words per minute going through our heads, 50 words per minute, 3,000 words per hour, flying around in there. And what is the tone of your self-talk? Is it like a courtroom where somebody's always being judged, somebody's always in the wrong? Or is it like a cozy living room where you feel really comfortable to just hang out and be? Or is it a mix of judgments and observations and fears, hopes and convictions and anxieties? Or maybe it's that idea, that trance of unworthiness that we get into. The idea that no matter how hard we try, we're never good enough. Some of you mentioned this on Monday when we were talking about ecological footprint and what happens when we're combating or trying to forget some other things. The idea that our not enoughness can be combated with consumption. And that's why marketing works so well, is because we already feel kind of shitty about ourselves sometimes. And so to have this marketing, you're not okay, but you will be if you buy this, buy these jeans, buy these shoes, and then you're going to be okay. Then you're going to be cool. And that shows up for some people as a shopping addiction, the empty hole, whether it's a shopping addiction or a drinking addiction or a drug addiction. It's an empty hole that's trying to be filled, that we are trying to fill for ourselves. The addiction to busyness, the addiction to stuff or food or drugs or your phone, or just the idea of shopping can be, it's like you keep going back. It's like an itch that you scratch that doesn't ever get satisfied. So the hole in the story is that we don't feel like we're enough, never enough, unhappy inside. And so everything we see outside of us takes on that same mood. We're seeing the world around us with not enoughness. So the war inside is expanding to the war outside. So that living in a not enoughness means that we're always grasping for something else. So I I judge myself in the way that I struggle with the idea that I'm just not fun. I'm not fun enough. I'm not able to let down and play. And there's a lot of backstory that goes into this that runs in my head. The way that I was raised, the responsibility that I feel because of the roles that I have in my life, that I tend toward being an introvert. Um, those are the way that I am in the world. It just seems like I'm too old for my actual age. The things that I like doing aren't the things that people my age like to do in a lot of cases. And so I struggle because I feel like I'm not fun enough. I've got little kids. I should be really fun for them, but I feel like I'm not fun enough for them or for my friends or even for myself sometimes. So I'd like you to take a moment and brainstorm this on your notes page and then discuss with your group. I know that this is a really vulnerable conversation, but I believe that it can be really valuable for connection to yourself and to others, acknowledging how we feel like we're not enough. So take a couple minutes with this. So somebody in the chat mentioned that a lot of this comes, some of these feelings of judgment of self come from when we compare ourselves to other people, whether that's in person or on social media, that can lead to this. And so there is a lot of ways that we could think about this, and I'd like to share a video with you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's do this.
Scene zero, take one. Mark?
So we've got one question that we want to ask you today.
Okay, well, what's that question?
The question is, if you could change one thing about your body, what would it be?
Only one.
I would change my forehead. I have a really big forehead.
I'd like to be taller.
The puffiness of my face, my ears, my big ears.
Stretch marks after having a baby.
A lot of times, like, kids would make fun of me, like, hey man, you get big ears, you got Dumbo over there, you know?
Definitely my skin, because I've dealt with acne and eczema issues ever since I was a little kid.
我小时候，因为大家比较喜欢大眼睛的那种美女，所以我就也希望自己眼睛能大一些。Growing up, like a lot of people call me five head or like your forehead's so big. They've always like would say something to me about it.
Yo diría porque muchos dos caminan derecho y como que mi pie está un poco chueco. When I was younger, I felt like I wasn't quite adequate enough.
Can you sit on the chair?
No.
All right, I'm going to ask you one question.
What's the question?
If you could change one thing about your body, what would you change?
You know, have a mermaid tail.
Probably like a shark mouth, so I could eat a lot of stuff.
I could have teleportation in my body. Extra pointy ears. I want legs like a cheetah so I can run faster like a cheetah. I could have wings so I could fly.
I don't think there's anything to change.
I like my body actually.
Yeah, you wouldn't change anything?
Nothing else. Just a mermaid tail.
A lot of people obsess about getting older and about the wrinkles. I love my white hair. I loved it when it started turning white. It's one of those things, because I chose to stay this way, because it just wouldn't be me if I totally changed the way I look.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed it. We want to give a big shout out to iNature Skincare for sponsoring the film. Make sure you check out their link below.
So where does it come from? We aren't born with this self-judgment. Kids don't suffer from it in such beautiful, beautiful ways, those kids. Self-alienation is another kind of epidemic. Not being able to see the beauty that we have is an epidemic. Somebody said in the chat that comparison is the thief of joy. Somebody else said we spend so much time judging ourselves and what other people think about us that we never stop to realize that everyone feels the same way. The true person who really judges us is ourselves, and that's what's heartbreaking, they said. So what's it like, this idea of playing cool and conforming like a herd of sheep, being afraid to be ourselves? We get praise for mellowing out. I was told as a kid, Jennifer, you're so emotional. Yeah, and that's who I am. You'll see me cry in this class. You're going to see me laugh in this class. I am emotional and I love it about myself, but it's taken me a while to get to that place, to accept that part of me. It was easier to just wear a mask and pretend I was something else for a long, long time. Being not too engaged, not too sad, not too happy, just easy to silence myself and create a false belonging. It feels like going small. It feels like, I think there are some of you that know that feeling of, well, if we want to fit in, then we must shrink ourselves down and just be like everybody else. Make ourselves silent or invisible, being separate from yourself. That idea of, hey, you wanna go out to the bars tonight? Well, yeah, sure, that sounds great. But you don't really want to. You just agree to, because you might be uncomfortable being alone. She says this quote, not she, this quote, my dad gave my oldest son this plaque. Don't try to fit when you were born to stand out. And I thought it was absolutely beautiful. Coming from grandfather to grandson, and me getting to learn and watch in the middle. So I remember this from our fourth class, and then also from our unexam, is the idea that our head, our heart, and our gut are all connected via the vagus nerve. And in all of our cases, we are each unique and beautiful and important. The idea that I wake up with myself every day. I am my lifelong companion. And I believe that one of the coolest things about each and every one of you is that you're different, that you are enough, that you belong, that you have a right to existence. And so this first point of disconnect that I'm making about my hypothesis, that separation from ourselves leads us to being separated from each other and separated from Earth. So how does that manifest itself? At this moment in history, humans are dangerously insane and very sick species, Eckhart Tolle writes. As a testament to this insanity, humans killed over 100 million fellow humans in the past century alone. No other species violates itself on such a grand scale. Only people who are in a deeply alienated state would create such a reality. Heartbreaking. News today of another shooting in Atlanta. Shooting spree in Atlanta. Absolutely heart-wrenching. Absolutely disconnected. It might not be that dramatic, the killing of each other, but what about this, the separation from each other? This is our modern standalone home, the private house with the gate, the fence, it's walled in, each member of the family having a separate room, private transportation, spending time indoors, being able to drive straight into the garage and walk into the house without even getting out of the car. There is a statistic that says that 25%, and that's a rising figure now, 25% of Americans have no trusted friend. This isn't community. We are social animals. And this disconnect from each other, the way it's evolved to be, is not the way it's supposed to be, as we are social, interdependent individuals. This book Sherry Turkle wrote about why we expect more from technology and less from each other. This technological world that we live in with phones. I mean, look at those little kids on their phones, alone together. And I know that this is a battle. This is a battle in my household with my children and their devices. Technology makes it unnecessary to ask much of others, if anything. Instead of visiting, we phone. Instead of phoning, we text. Instead of texting, we post updates for our friends on social media, whatever platforms you might choose. And so, like shopping, it doesn't really completely satisfy us. So we keep reaching for it. There's no satisfaction level. It's addicting because it doesn't address the deeper need for relationship, the deeper need for community. And yet, in this world, there are still people who do it differently. These beautiful people of Guatemala, their belief is that if a child is sick, then the whole family is sick. If there are several people in the village that are sick, then the village is sick. And the same collective consciousness expands to the land. For these people, it's impossible to say, I am healthy, but the forest is dying. To imagine that they were healthy when their family, their village, or the surrounding forest was not, would be absurd, as if you or I were to say something like, well, I have a fatal liver disease, but I'm okay. I'll be fine. Yeah, that's just my liver. It doesn't make sense. The disconnect. And so just as your sense of self includes your liver, theirs includes their family and their village and the surrounding land. There's no separation. All my ancestors are behind me. Be still, they say. Watch and listen. You are the result of the love of thousands. We belong to something much bigger than ourselves. Remember, I mentioned those 50,000 generations before us. We are connected as community. Whether we really see it today or not, it's there and we can rejuvenate it. And what about the separation from Earth? Remember this? We've looked at a couple of two other photos like this from different malls. And you had wonderful comments about what this represents. The fossil fuel consumption, the greed and the disconnect, the idea that that this represents separation in a lot of ways. We are not going to the source to find what we need. The down jackets that you see there in the lower left corner, those down jackets came from geese. We aren't going to get the down from the geese. And I'm not suggesting that's the best way to go about it, but the idea of awareness of where our things come from, the consciousness that we are using Earth as a storehouse, as a resource, and as a dump site. What does that look like? And so, what does it mean to think about Earth as our larger body? I'd like you to take in this image and discuss. What do you feel and think and intuit when you look at this sort of image? At this image. Take a couple minutes in your group to take that in. I really love what you're saying about this image. For some of you, it reminded you of Moana or of the movie Avatar. And some of you, and if that's the case, I ask you, what were the lessons of those movies that tie directly into what we're talking about in class today? So some of you say that I almost see it as Mother Nature dying as we kill her, or as we all die in the end and fall back into Earth. Some people said that picture shows the way we are meant to feel with nature and the planet that we live on. It's how we should try to be always. Someone else said it looks like Mother Nature and she's laying down because she's tired of how Earth is being treated. Somebody said it looks like she needs Earth to relieve some sort of pain. The picture shows that if we don't continue to take care of Earth and if we don't, everything will die or be forgotten about. And somebody else said she's tired because humans are wearing her out and taking so much from her. And somebody else said we are growing with Earth. So many different interpretations of one image. I think there's something really beautiful about that. So I'd like to address one more thing about the pandemic as we are trying to, some people said this image makes them uncomfortable, and there's something curious about that. It could, I'm not saying it shouldn't, but if that's the case, it's always good to ask why. What's behind that discomfort? Or if you think it's beautiful, what is it about it that's beautiful? So I'd like to say, as we try to make meaning of the pandemic, now that we're a year into this, it's worth asking ourselves if when we build and produce and grow without limit, is it in the long run self-destructive? When does development turn from being productive to catastrophic, from sustainable to greedy? I believe though corporations are often the worst offenders, the corporations are the worst offenders, each of us can ask these questions of ourselves. Beyond the practical measures to keep each other safe, there's nothing we can do about this uncertainty of our situation. But the resistance to that uncertainty is what creates regression into fear or anxiety or panic or disbelief. So what's going to happen between now and when life goes back to normal? What's that transition going to be like? I'd like to point out that this weekend is the spring equinox. It's the reconciliation between day and night, winter and spring. It's when forces that have been dormant over the winter begin to stir to new life as old ways fall and crumble away, the time of winter. In this exchange, nature finds balance between the extremes, between daylight and darkness. Perhaps this clarifying and regenerative effect is also possible in our personal lives. What happens if we think about finding balance? What happens if we think about what's going to happen after the pandemic? What's the normal that you want to create? Maybe it's a way of considering how we are in the world. We are connected. We are interdependent rather than independent. So whatever our personal circumstances are, we all have a chance at clearing out the collective pollution from our thoughts. So for this pandemic time, maybe we can continue to allow a different rhythm to move us from within. replenishing our devotion to our true nature. Maybe then we'll hear our voices of originality, who have gifts for the world, our unique individual beings. Here's your pack back question that I wanted to bring back around for just a moment in case any of you need it. So maybe some things I said today are upsetting, and maybe some things I said the other day are upsetting. I want you to think about how you're responding to your upset. Thanks so much. I hope that you have a beautiful day.